So organization development is a comprehensive approach to planned organizational change that involves the application of behavioral science in a systematic and long-range effort to improve organizational effectiveness. Okay, what does that mean? So organizational development is you're using overall comprehensive change, right? That's going to involve how we look at why people do things the way they do in a very scientific way to improve effectiveness. So when an organization wants to change, you're studying, this is the culture that we're in, this is the culture of our organization, and what kind of things can we do to improve that to create change? So the goals for organizational development are outcome goals focused on task accomplishments, process goals focused on the way people work together. Organizational development seeks to develop the organization members' capacity for self-renewal. Organizational development is committed to change through freedom of choice, shared power, and self-reliance. And organizational development takes advantage of knowledge about human behavior in organizations. So in organizational development, you look at establishing a working relationship. So figuring out the way people work, establishing the trust from others, diagnosing a problem, coming up with an intervention, evaluating if it works, and achieving a sustainable relationship that goes both ways. So establishing a change relationship, creating links with members of client systems, okay? So you are the chief nursing officer, you create links with all nurses, okay? You talk to people who work at the bedside, in QI, in education managers, and you have a relationship and you figure out what issues there are. You gather and look at data. You set change objectives. So you're unfreezing, right? We need to change these things. I like these things. We're going to keep them. Intervention. So you're actually going to use collaborative action to implement desired change. So maybe you want to decrease turnover. And so you implement a new change and then you evaluate it and reinforce to support the change. And you withdraw to leave members of client systems self-reliant, so you achieve a terminal relationship and you know you can always come back to them. So action research. This is the process of systematically collecting data on an organization, feeding it back to members for action planning, and evaluating results by collecting more data and repeating the process as necessary. So you're going to go and look at the organization, talk to members and say, this is what's really happening in your organization. So we need to start a plan of action and then evaluate the results by collecting more data and repeating the process. So then you make the change and you keep evaluating and getting feedback. And this is initiated when someone senses a performance gap. So steps in the action research process. So problem sensing. I sense this is a problem. I see that this is a problem. This is a blatant problem. Data gathering. Why do we do it this way? Why is it not working? What is the better way? Data analysis and feedback. Okay. Well, this is what I've analyzed. What do you think? What should we do? Let's plan the action. Let's implement the action. Let's evaluate, make adjustments, and follow up. So here's what we just talked about. Again, it's a constant feedback loop with the unfreezing, changing, and refreezing. Individual organizational development interventions. So sensitivity training, understand how to approach people. Management training, you need strong managers. Role negotiation, not everybody's role is being utilized properly. So you might have to redesign a job and you might need to talk to people about their career planning. Use someone in the bedside who thinks that's all they're going to do, but really that's not the right trajectory for them, and helping them helping figure out what their career plan is. Or someone says, well, I eventually want to be CNO. Okay, well, what actions are you taking right now to get there? And helping them see how they can get there, and it can help involve that change. So team building is important. Getting a team to understand how they work together and having them have a shared vision is really important. And then consulting on the process. How is this process change helping? What ideas do you have on this process that we can make changes? And then intergroup team building, right? So there's teams within teams and making sure all of them are working together. So survey feedback, getting feedback all the time from everybody about change and how it's working. Confrontation meetings, literally say face to face with people and saying, how is this working? You're not doing this. I'm not doing that. How do we get there? Structural redesign, sometimes having to let people go, sometimes having to restructure the way communication is done. And then managing by objectives. So setting up objectives and leadership is aimed by those objectives and then managing people based on them. So we want to improve outcomes. And so if it's not getting done, I'm going to manage based on that. I might move you. I might fire you. You might be warned.
You know, every Greek play is a play about power. Practically all of Shakespeare's plays are about the use and misuse of power. And if there's one thing central to leadership, it's the test, how do I use my power? For my own self-interest or for the good of others? And so I think that this is a huge challenge, and therefore having a mechanism and a mirror in wonderful literature enables people to think about the fact that all power involves a kind of Faustian plot where you get the power but you might lose your soul. And I think that's particular for healthcare is you might be able to improve the systems and procedures and processes, but you might lose the whole purpose of healthcare. Leaders need to think about the impact of the psychological challenge of dealing with healthcare. It's not like running a business. It's not like making helicopters or dealing with Tesco's. It's about human beings, and it's about the difficulties and the challenges that we as clinicians are faced with when we deal with people. How do we manage that in ourselves? And how do we manage that with patients? So I think we haven't really paid enough attention to the anxiety produced by the kind of work that we do, the uncertainty, the ambiguity, the complexity. It is really not similar to managing an organisation which produces things. I think a leader has a very important role in terms of a role model, and the values and their ways of interacting are contagious. I know that when I go into a senior manager's office, into a senior team, I know that the behaviours in that team will be replicated everywhere in the organisation. So if that's an atmosphere of distrust, if that's an atmosphere of bullying, that will be replicated throughout the organisation. So leaders on their own can't do anything, but they are very influential in creating a culture and a climate in which people work. I think we need to have rebalance the system from, particularly from medical education, needs to balance the humanities as well as the technical medical area, because I think that increased specialisation means that there's increased fragmentation of service, and it's the patient that loses out in the gaps between specialisation. And I think all of healthcare needs to think about the social and psychological aspects of organisations. Organisations are social systems. Change won't happen unless people feel free and feel psychologically safe to raise concerns and to do things differently and to use their imagination on an everyday basis to solve problems. This requires leaders to create an environment in which people do feel safe and in which people can be supported when they need help, can ask for help when they need help. And I think a lot of the pressure of targets and the financial pressures has driven out psychological safety and created cultures of fear. Through somebody said this morning that command and control worked. I'm not sure I believe command and control worked. I think we're suffering the consequences now, which is what happened in mid-staffs and which can happen anywhere.